Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ignite SIUC. Thank you very much for braving this weather to get here tonight. So I'm sure you're wondering, what is Ignite? If you didn't look it up online and you only read the ticket, you know that it's something that started in 2006. Well, Ignite is a series of speedy 5-minute presentations where speakers can talk about anything that they want. So it's like a hodgepodge of a variety of different topics that you can get. Which is why tonight we're going to hear about why soft skills are so important, but also hear why we might want to nominate a pig for president. You get 20 slides and they auto-advance every 15 seconds. So this format ensures two things. The first thing that this ensures is that if the talk isn't that great or just not a topic you're interested in, the good news is it's over in 5 minutes. Another thing that makes this great, though, is that if you do enjoy a topic, you get sort of a snippet of it without getting overwhelmed with information. And you can say, well, what can really be said in 5 minutes? Well, Scott Birkin, one of the founders of Ignite, says that the Gettysburg Address is about 2 minutes long. So you can actually do 2 Gettysburg Addresses in one Ignite talk. So you can say something of importance. The second thing that this short format ensures is that the presentations are well practiced. The talks need to align with the slides, and it's exactly 5 minutes. And rehearse we did. When I asked the speakers what they had learned through this 2-month process of getting ready for tonight's event, one of our speakers, Wendt, said, I didn't realize that it was going to take 30 hours to prepare a 5-minute presentation. But despite all the rehearsals, let's recognize that when slides are moving on their own, it's a little intimidating. So one thing about Ignite as a cultural phenomenon that's happening all over the world is that the audience is on the speaker's side. If a speaker happens to forget something or gets a little tongue-tied, you're not going to hold up against him, right? You're going to cheer them on, right? Okay, but the best way to understand something is just to go ahead and see it. So I want to go ahead and get on with this show. We have 9 speakers tonight covering a variety of topics. We'll run through 5 speakers, and then we'll have an intermission of 10 minutes that allows the speakers that previously spoke to come back on stage and answer some questions. Now, this is an intermission, so we assume that you might want to get up, go to the bathroom, get another speakeasy, and come back, and we're okay with that. But if you want to stick around and ask questions during this intermission, that's a great time to do it. And then after that, we'll have 4 more speakers, and then a 5-minute Q&A, knowing that after that Q&A, you can go down to the lobby and engage with the speakers down there. And we have the venue till 8:30, so I highly recommend that you do that. At this time, I'd ask that you do silence your cell phones if you have them. There's nothing wrong with live tweeting or sending an Instagram to the fact that you're at one of the hottest events in Carbondale this evening. But we don't want a cell phone to be ringing or buzzing when a speaker is talking. It's just not going to be very helpful to them. So I'd like to move on to our first speaker. Our first speaker is Damian. Danny is a Carbondale native. Yeah, go ahead and applaud for him. Why not? Yeah, sure. Wait, stay out there. We're not ready for you. He's super eager, I know it. I mean, he's been like here for like 2 hours. Like, when is he going to come on? So he is a Carbondale native, and he is currently a senior producer for the PBS affiliate show Alt News 2646. Tonight, Damian explains how the hero's myth embedded in stories we love can help us overcome our anxiety. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage our first speaker, Damian. Hi. Hi. Ready? All right, here we go.
There's a film called The Truman Show, starring Jim Carrey, who plays Truman, a man who wakes up to the fact that he doesn't exist in the real world, but instead inside a scripted TV show. So he tries to escape from this fake world and enter into the real one. But when he finally reaches the exit, the creator of the show calls out to Truman, "You can't leave, Truman. You're afraid. That's why you can't leave." Truman then leaves. He does exactly what the all-powerful figure tells him he cannot do by crossing the border from fantasy into reality. This is the hero myth. But it's also the basic outline of the transformation into an independent adult. The transformation of something unconscious and asleep into something conscious and awake. But it all hinges on one thing, not the decision to enter into the unknown real world, but the action of doing so. Imagine it's your birthday. and you've asked to go to the public pool. You're not so little anymore, but you're still a kid. There's the diving board. You've never jumped off of one, but you want to. You climb up to the top, and once you reach the top, that's when you feel the wind blow. And high up feels way higher up in your body than it did in your imagination. You shake as you reach the board's end, its very tip. Across the pool, your father gives you an encouraging look. But just because you see it doesn't mean it reaches you. You feel totally and utterly alone. You're paralyzed on the border between the known and the unknown. Do you jump? Or do you head back down the ladder? The question inside that question is, can you overcome anxiety or not? Chronic anxiety is the most common mental illness in the US, and its modern definition still fits with Kierkegaard's original formulation, that it is fear entangled in uncertainty. And it's all the more uncertain when you're alone. From a mythological perspective, the anxiety, the thing that paralyzes you, that turns you to stone, that's Medusa. And how does Perseus overcome Medusa? He defeats that which threatens to permanently paralyze him through reflection. So reflect on this. The hero myth itself is the natural structure of thought, which allows you to act in spite of anxiety by putting the situation in a more meaningful context. And this is the way the story's been used since the time of primitive man. Psychologist Eric Neumann detailed that for primitive man, it wasn't unusual prior to a hunt to perform a magic ritual where the hunters would perform the symbolic actions of a successful hunt as a play, as a drama. And this primed them to do what they needed to do. This magic, which presumably they thought was working on the animal, was actually working, but on the hunters themselves. It was the story. The story prepared them for action, focused their attention, and when the time came to cross the border from intention into action, there was no uncertainty, because they just had to act out the story. But besides the fact that it focuses your action, a myth is a myth because it has a generality. It doesn't just apply to me or you. It only endures because it applies to everyone at all times. And that's what makes it archetypal. Its existence illustrates that this solitary confrontation with fear is not unique to you. That it cuts through the heart of every single person. And that means in the context of the story, you're not alone. And that's not always to say that you don't get broken. You do. But you get broken either way. So why not take the path that at least has the potential to take you towards something real? Because at the end of this path, you stand to gain the uniquely human treasure, the ability to confront the creator or source of your fear and finally say, no. In this, you discover a new way of living, in which the voluntary sacrifice of the familiar for the unfamiliar is revealed to be the determining action which transforms fear into joy. You can choose to jump into the water. And through the story, you're more likely to do that. And I can say all these things that sound nice, but when you actually do it, that's when, like Truman, you become truly human. Thank you.
All right, so that was our first Ignite Talk. How do you feel about that? Wasn't that awesome? So I'm building in some time here so someone can run down and get me the ticket stubs for door prizes. In the meantime, though, I did want to ask Danny a little bit about his talk. My understanding, Danny, is that this is a 5-minute snippet of a larger project that you're working on. Am I correct in that?
Basically, I worked on it. It was an essay. I wrote it for a contest. I spent 100 hours writing this one essay, and this is the 5-minute version of that 100 hours. So
Did you find it challenging to get it down? Actually, this is the weird thing. When he showed up to give his practice talk for the first time, it was 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And I said, you need to build in 30 more seconds. I'm saying everything that I want to say. Isn't that crazy? It's amazing. All right, so OJ, are they going to be able to start the next video? Okay, sweet. So anyway, did you want to say a couple more things about the project or anything that you're going to be doing that's pretty exciting in the next month? I told them everything I have to tell them. Exactly. Thank you very much, Danny. Okay, so our next speaker is Emily Buice. Emily Buice is a senior studying communication studies and history at Southern Illinois University. She's currently writing a senior thesis on the history of mac and cheese. She is interested in the dish's relation to American social and cultural history. She's going to help us tonight understand, as the title of her talk suggests, mac and cheese's journey to America's comfort food. Here's a little bit of a warning. She told me to tell you that she's sorry if the talk makes you a little bit hungry. She apologizes in advance for choosing all of the slides that she did that show great dishes of mac and cheese. So dear audience, welcome to the stage, Emily Buice.
So when I tell people that I research mac and cheese, I usually get one of two responses. It's either a, why would you research that? Or what I call a mac story. Most people have a mac story. It's the story of their grandmother making her great mac and cheese for a special family occasion, or of a late night college meal with Kraft mac and cheese. I've even heard stories involving long road trips and mac and cheese burgers. Mac and cheese holds a special place in the hearts of Americans. It's a comfort food, or a food that carries a nostalgia or has a sentimental value. But you might be wondering, how did it get to this place? Well, mac and cheese can be traced back to 11th century Greece. This dish was closer to spaghetti noodles sprinkled with Parmesan than the cream and cheese sauces that we know today. From here, in 1530, Catherine de' Medici married King Henry II of France, bringing mac and cheese with her. By the late 18th century, it was a popular dish in the elite society of France. Thomas Jefferson was exposed to it when he was the U.S. ambassador to France, and he loved it. He had a macaroni machine shipped to Monticello, where he actually tried to make it, wasn't successful, and then just imported noodles for the dish. He even had it served at a state dinner in 1802, where one guest remarked that it wasn't a very agreeable dish. And with Jefferson, we actually see an untold side of history, that of slaves that give mac and cheese its soul food connotations. If you go into a meat and three restaurant in the Deep South, I'll be surprised if you don't see mac and cheese on the menu. But Thomas Jefferson himself didn't make the first American mac and cheese. James Hemings would have. Hemings was a slave that Jefferson had trained at French culinary schools and put in charge of his Monticello kitchens. Hemings would have been the first person to make an American mac and cheese. Having slaves cook meals resulted in African cooking techniques and practices being brought into mainstream culture, including macaroni and cheese. These dishes were then distributed throughout the culture of the time through cookbooks. Mary Randolph, who was a relative of Thomas Jefferson, is often credited with having the first cookbook with an American mac and cheese recipe, which is thought to be Jefferson's own recipe. Despite slaves cooking mac and cheese and contributing to its American identity, it's unlikely that they ate it often, if at all. Cheese was an expensive ingredient, so this price barrier kept it in an elite society for many years. So you might be wondering, how did it get to the everyday person's dinner table? Mass production. In 1937, Kraft Foods produced a boxed mac and cheese that cost 19 cents for 4 servings. It's now an American favorite. At the time, they sold 18 million boxes within 1 year. This is the middle of the Great Depression, so families were looking for any way to put food on the dinner table. And this was an appealing option. Along with popularizing mac and cheese, Kraft also redefined mac norms. Up until this time, macaroni was a catch-all term for any type of pasta, but it was typically something like a spaghetti noodle. But by using tubular noodles in their mac, Kraft redefined what Americans thought of mac and cheese and created what we think of today with the elbow macaroni. So Kraft mac and cheese remained popular throughout World War II, when working mothers needed something quick and easy to put on the dinner table. Easy to cook dishes, like Kraft, allowed women to reduce their household responsibilities, like long cooking times, and join the workforce. And this is how we get that emotional connection to mac. Mass production brought mac and cheese into the everyday person's home, and later we see families making their own homemade versions. From adding breadcrumbs and onions and special cheeses, families made mac and cheese their own. We see this continuing on into a trend of overindulgence. Families really enjoyed making these dishes and gathering around them, and then making new alternative techniques. So these gourmet versions have alternative techniques or ingredients that give the dishes a little special twist. Fried mac and cheese strips, lobster mac and cheese, even mac and cheese burgers are all examples of this trend. And it's tied to a trend of American overindulgence. The US Department of Agriculture reports that we're eating 20% more calories today than we did in the 1980s. Obesity and related diseases are on the rise, and overindulgence is a leading cause. So you can see mac and cheese has had a long journey to becoming America's comfort food. It's tied to mass production, even soul food, and our overindulgence. Overindulgence in mac and cheese is actually tied to having additional ingredients like bacon, lobster, and truffles. All that stuff elevates the calorie count. So next time that you're eating your grandmother's mac and cheese or your roommate's craft, which I won't tell them you borrowed, think of the history behind the food and what it's taken to become what it is on your plate today.
Okay, so my understanding is that when you tell people you're doing this, they always ask a question, which is better, mac and cheese or, well, it's got to be Kraft mac and cheese, or Velveeta shells and cheese. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Which one is it?
I prefer the Kraft mac and cheese, but Kraft owns both of these, just so you know.
That's right. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and do our first door prize of the evening. So I'm going to have you open the magic box and pull out a ticket. And this is for something that is just a little bit classy, because we do it classy around here. It is a mac and cheese and wine and crackers gift bag. And the wine is just as cheap as the mac and cheese. No, it's not as cheap as, but it fits it. All right, so here we go. We're going to pull out a number. You're going to need your ticket stub for this. If you are number 19158. Wait, I don't get it.
This is Dr. H. She's my thesis advisor.
That's rigged. Look at how long these are. That's totally rigged. He was like, I used to watch a lot of magic shows. I've seen that, but I wasn't paying attention. All right, we're going to go take that box from you. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you very much, Emily.
I'm going to have to ID you, though, to make sure that you can take this wine. Okay. Okay, so our next speaker is DeRuntz. We all know that college students like mac and cheese, but they also like getting a job to pay for all that tab of delicious food that they've racked up. Our next speaker, Dr. DeRuntz, is a professor in the College of Engineering and director of SIU's award-winning Leadership Development Program. Tonight, he shares with us how this program in engineering is actually engineering quality thought leaders through soft skills development. At this time, I'd like to welcome to the stage Dr. D.
Thank you, Craig. It is so exciting to be here and being given this opportunity to talk about things that we're passionate about. So let's get this started. About a month ago, I was having breakfast in Peoria with Sud, an SIU new graduate who is a member of the Leadership Development Program, also known as the LDP. His best friend, Guru, who was not a member of the LDP, was mildly complaining about the value of career fairs. And he said, "Do you think that they're a waste of time?" And I said, "No, I disagree wholeheartedly, you know?" And you have to understand where he's coming from with this beef. He's been to many career fairs. He's a graduate student in mechanical engineering, near perfect GPA. He's not getting any callbacks, and graduation is 2 weeks away from now, and he still doesn't have a job. So compare this to Sud, who has a nearly identical resume and is on a fast-track career. So Sud summarized it very well. He said, well, maybe, Guru, the problem is that your soft skills aren't strong enough. He said, well, wait a minute. What are you talking about? And I said, well, you know, Guru, the problem is that there's nothing that differentiates you from anybody else when you go to these career fairs. At this moment, Sud broke in and he said, Guru, introduce yourself to Dr. D right now. And, well, it was awful. I mean, it was a weak handshake. There was no eye contact, no follow-on conversation. And Sud proclaims, he says, that's it. The whole argument is proven in this handshake. Now, research shows that 40% of college graduates will graduate and take a job that doesn't require a college degree. Clearly not in their career plan when they started this venture, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. The problem is not that there's not enough jobs out there. Jim Hefty, Vice President of Human Resources at ATS, Advanced Technology Services, said there's no shortage of good jobs, only a shortage of good talent out there. So why the disconnect? Why are there so many great students with near perfect GPAs who aren't getting these great jobs? I believe it's a lack of soft skills and leadership skills. So this is Dick Bladeau, proud SIU alum, chairman of ATS. In 2006, my new dean went to him and asked for a large donation back to SIU. And Dick quickly replied, I don't give away money, I invest it. And that day he invested in the starting of the LDP. And he also gave me one charge. He said, Bruce, I want you to go out and I want you to develop the most valuable product in the world today, a future technical leader. And I live every day trying to do that mission. And in the LDP, we take our students through 3 stages. First, we teach them how to lead themselves. Second, we teach them how to be a high-functioning team member. And third, how to become a leader of their peers. All these are new habits for these millennials. When they can demonstrate that they can do that first habit of leading themselves, we reward them with a team tie or team scarf, which we usually have to teach them how to tie that tie. Now, we all know that habits are really hard to form or hard to break, particularly with millennials. And so I had to figure out what was their why. How could I reach them? What is it they care about the most and they would follow? What I found out was they care most about each other. They care about the environment. And we structure our experiential learning processes so that they can learn to lead by helping their community, by doing community services, and changing the world. Now, you might think that this program would cost a fortune. Well, it costs our students nothing because we have the most amazing sponsors and a generous grant from the National Science Foundation who believes in this mission. And to date, our students have a 96% pre-graduation placement rate and a 30% accelerated career path. This is the difference between retiring in middle management and executive leadership. Now, let's go back to Sud, who was a member of the LDP for 3 years. Today, he's enjoying a fast-track career with ATS, who's also sponsoring his H-1B visa. And just like Steve Austin, the $6 million man from the 1970s, today we can engineer a stronger, smarter, more compassionate servant leader who's going to change the world, and it doesn't cost $6 million. Thank you.
Okay, so we got talking after you put this together, and I was like, we don't want to make it sound like we're throwing Guru aside or under the bus here. So my understanding is that actually after this meeting, some amazing things happened. You want to tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Guru was equally struck. The story I told you was not made up. It actually happened just the way I told you. And so he immediately realized the folly and has asked me for coaching and also some of his friends, Sud. And his skills are improving. He's starting to get some calls for interviews, and I continue to coach him.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you very much. So I was going to say that maybe someone out there listening on the live stream is hiring engineers and could hire a guru, but unfortunately these walls are really thick and we can't get a signal in here, so there is no live stream. But I do want to thank the SIU Communications, University Communications for coming out here, and they're actually recording this and it'll be encoded quickly for publication onto YouTube. And I think that it's really great, and I really want to thank Hannah Erickson and Kaylee McGinnis, especially for helping me out with a lot of the promotion and publicizing of this event. Go ahead and clap for them. Yeah, that's great. Now that you've seen a few Ignite Talks, I know you're sitting there and you're like, that's something I want to do next year. So here's a few things that you might want to know if you're thinking about putting together a speech like this. The average speaker speaks at a rate of 150 words per minute. So if you're a fast speaker, you might get 160. If you're a slower speaker, 140. But the sweet spot is 150. That means you get 750 words broken up across all the slides at 37.5 words per slide. So if you're thinking about doing an Ignite Talk and you're ready to go home and start panning it out, open up 20 slides and start typing in 37.5 words, and you will be getting there very quickly. Now, when our next speaker, Katherine Hinders, came to me, she actually had 1,000 words that we had to work with. But she narrowed her thesis down on the future of fertility to this 5-minute talk. So that's not a very easy task. She really practiced hard for this, so I want to say that as a master's student, she's going to be defending her thesis very soon, and she's looking at dystopian narratives in film and television and how they use infertility, and then how the real demographic shifts actually that are happening out in the real world are driving these narratives. When I asked her what she would have talked about if she had more time, she said that she would have given a little bit more detail into the misrepresentation of infertility in dystopian narratives. Makes sense to me given her research. The title of her talk, Future of Fertility, should enlighten you. Welcome to the stage, Katherine Hinders.
So we make a lot of movies and television about having babies. It's part of the circle of life. If we need it to sustain our population. Makes sense. We actually make a lot of movies and television specifically about how difficult it can be for couples to conceive. I've made a list. Now, this is just a small sampling, not comprehensive, but a lot of these shows and movies include a narrative about a usually white, usually upper middle class couple who undergo fertility treatments to try and conceive. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes they adopt. This is a struggle that many couples face in reality. Now, since it's women who become physically pregnant, this is often fertility is seen as like a women's issue, but in reality, it is the fertility rates, the sperm counts of men in the West have more than halved over the past 40 years. So yeah, shocking. So because of this, it's not our fault, it's actually your fault. So please consider this. And, you know, when we talk about, you might read about this in the new media. Oh, okay, sorry. About fertility rates decreasing in America. But actually, women are more likely to have more children than ever before. We have about 2.07 children on average now, up from about 1.86 in 2006, which was the lowest year in recent record. Now, because we have more babies, we're actually doing okay. And women are waiting a little bit longer to have babies. The teenage fertility rate, or pregnancy rate, is going down. This is all good news. There is, of course, some bad news. The maternal mortality rate is increasing in the US. Ours is double that of Saudi Arabia and Canada, and triple that of the UK. Maternal mortality includes death during childbirth, but also complications due to pregnancy up to a year afterwards. These statistics they're affecting women of color more, and that's bad. So, Serena Williams, after she gave birth, was feeling the symptoms of a pulmonary embolism, which she'd had before. She told her doctors, but they insist on giving her other tests and other medication instead of doing what she needed, which she eventually did. She's okay. If doctors aren't willing to listen to Serena Williams, they probably aren't going to listen to mothers of color who haven't won 23 Grand Slams. We need to dismantle the systems of racism that are leaving the concerns of this vulnerable population ignored. All mothers need proper care if we're going to sustain our population. What I think is actually driving our concerns about fertility in the US is the fact that more white people are dying than are being born. Scientists predicted that the minority majority would happen in 2045, but with more recent data, I think that date might be sooner. And as I said before, women are still having children, but perhaps because we are waiting longer or because of the way we measure this data, white women aren't having enough children at this moment to sustain the white population. I would like to state for the record, this is perfectly fine. The human race doesn't need white people. Each generation is going to be a little bit less white, and that's okay. So, so women are waiting longer. That's okay, and so the future of fertility is going to look different for us, and I think there are some predictions that we can make. Women are waiting longer. It's going to be more difficult for couples to conceive as the sperm count goes down. It's going to be more expensive to do fertility treatments, and each generation is going to be less white, as I said before. And so I think what would be important for us in our media is to work towards a more accurate representation instead of focusing on how it defines us as intergenders. This is from a movie, Making Babies. In the trailer, she says, since I'm trying to have a kid, I don't feel like a woman anymore. It's just no good. We need to move past it. So the future is going to look different. And I think if we're looking at the science that some people are doing to maybe remedy some of these problems in the future, they've actually used mouse stem cells to make mouse egg cells that have successfully reproduced into mice, and so effectively cutting the male out of the reproductive process. They've also taken a premature lamb and grown it in a plastic bag. So we're gonna be okay. So my advice is, parting, fellas, if you want to have children and you don't yet, go to your doctor, talk to them. Ladies, this isn't exactly our problem, but if you want to have kids, maybe go to your doctor and try to get them to listen to you. We're not gonna die out tomorrow, but the world's gonna look a little different. And that's my talk.
All right. Every time I watched her practice this, the sheep in the bag really got me nauseous. So I'm sorry that you're going to be thinking about food here in a second because I'm going to do another door prize. This is for 2 pizzas to Primo's. So I'm going to open the box and you can watch my hand. There's nothing there. I'm going to pull out a ticket here. And I have 19066. 19066. Saw a couple people sneak out, so. All right, awesome. So you can collect that after the show. So I think that, as you can see, we're getting a lot of different talks. There's a lot of variety in the Ignite Talk format, so you can really just talk about anything that you want. And that's kind of why our food that we have downstairs is also a smorgasbord of things, which you can get here in just a moment when we have a brief intermission for you to go ahead and do some Q&A with the first speakers, but also maybe take a little bit of a break. Now, at a lot of Ignite events, there's about 15 speakers, and they break that up maybe in about 10 and 5, and sometimes there's even 20. So the most popular one is in Seattle that usually has 20 speakers, and they're currently looking for stories on superheroes. So if you want to talk about that, you can submit a video to them within the next few weeks. Okay, so our next speaker is Shema Ruperto. Shema Ruperto is the director for KidSake, an international nonprofit, and it is dedicated to supporting children in Bangladesh. She's passionate about kids, their futures, and sharing their stories. She is sharing a few of these stories with us tonight. Welcome to the stage, Shema Ruperto.
Good evening, everybody. For KidSake is an international nonprofit that transforms the lives of thousands of orphans and students in Bangladesh. By providing them their basic needs and education, we allow them to have a happy, healthy, and fulfilled life. To a starving person, a loaf of bread is God. That represents life or death. Imagine, if you have to struggle that much to stay alive, there's no capacity to develop your higher pursuits. We believe it's the birthright of every human being to have food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, education, and a safe environment. Without these things, life is about mere survival, but with them, the human potential can be unleashed. Let me share a few stories that demonstrate this truth. Hello? This is Raheem. His dad died when he was 8 years old. Already living hand to mouth, his mother simply could not provide for him. With little food and limited access to education, he was destined for destitute poverty. But his mother saved his life when she brought him to the Ibrahimpur orphanage. She entrusted us to feed him 3 meals a day, give him a warm bed, educate him, and give him a loving home. And that's exactly what we did. At the orphanage, he befriended 150 other boys who were just like him. Once they didn't have to deal with the day-to-day survival, they were able to become kids again. They played soccer, they laughed, they studied, and they pulled pranks through high school. Raheem thrived. He was eager to learn everything he could, and he graduated at the top of his high school class. And for Kids Sake offered him a scholarship to attend Unani Medical School. Today, Raheem is a doctor. He's 28 years old, and he has an Unani pharmacy and practice right on the grounds of the Ibrahimpur orphanage, so that he can serve the current children in the program, like Nayan. Nayan lost both of his parents by the time he was 8 years old. He's been at our orphanage now for a year, and he's doing just fine. And now he has the potential to become like Raheem in 20 years. Fatima lost her father when she was 14 years old. Suddenly, graduating high school became a really low priority for her family. Luckily, her uncle brought her to the girls' dormitory, where I'm happy to report that she finished her high school education. And now she's 25 years old. She's married, she has a bachelor's degree, and she's working on her master's in sociology. And she was recently the administrator for the girls' dormitory, where she looked after 42 young girls who shared her same story. The girls' dormitory is a haven. Without it, many of these young girls you see would be married as teens and would never graduate high school. But now they can graduate and take control of their lives. One of the girls in the program is Rubaya. She really captured my heart. She's in 6th grade, she's bright, she's beautiful, and now she also has the chance to excel like Fatima in the next 10 years. When I was visiting, Rubaya showed me everything she owned. It all fit in this box. She, like most of the girls in the dormitory, don't have much, but their basic needs are covered by the support of For Kids Sake. When you support For Kids Sake, you give Rubaya what she needs to become like Fatima, and Nayan what he needs to become like Raheem. And these are just a couple examples of how we change the destiny of children's lives on a daily basis. I often get asked, what about helping kids locally? And I say, children are children all over the world. They all hold a tremendous amount of potential, and their foundational years are critical for their future, no matter where they live. And we do help children locally. These kids are holding art that they donate to our annual art auction fundraiser. And what we've learned is that when kids help other kids in need, it ignites their compassion, and it plants a seed for them to become global citizens. Elise is one of those kids. Here she stands next to her oil pastel, We Made It to the Moon. And she's deeply touched that the sale of that piece will support a girl like Rubaya for 6 weeks. Tomorrow night, we actually culminate our 19th annual art auction. For Kids Sake has been providing a reliable, trustworthy, and impactful way to support underprivileged youth for 40 years. Fundraising is not easy. It's a massive redistribution project, but it's one of the most rewarding things. Did you know that by giving up that $5 cup of coffee we all love, we can feed 9 more children dinner tonight who otherwise would have gone to bed hungry? Join us in making the world a better place.
Okay, so I understand that tomorrow there's actually going to be an art auction ceremony, right? So can you tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yes, tomorrow night at the Long Branch Cafe and Bakery, we'll be culminating our 19th annual art auction. And it's a really big festive party. Unlike today, it's going to be very sunny and bright and exciting. It's outdoors. There's performances of bands and a lot of kid performances, actually. And it's the final chance to bid on these kids' artwork, which I just told you about. And there's about 70 pieces that don't have a home. So we really want all those kids to find homes, so come out and join us.
What time?
Oh, good call. 5 to 8 p.m. on Friday.
Tomorrow. That's great. We're looking forward to that. And at this time, we're going to take a little break, but we're going to have a Q&A with the speakers for those that want to stick around and do that. For those that want to just go down and get another drink or maybe go to the restroom, you can do that as well. That's fine. So at this time, I'd like to invite Danny, Damian, Emily Buice, Bruce DeRuntz, and Katherine Hinders back to the stage where you can ask them any questions that you would like. We don't have a wandering mic, but it's a small venue, I think, that you can kind of project. And also, at this time, we'll do a couple door prizes. Towards the end, so everybody's back. So stick around. And if you have questions about the Ignite format as well, I'm happy to answer those questions if you exhaust the questions for the speakers. Okay, so do we have any questions from the audience? I'm going to step forward here because it's kind of bright. It's brighter, actually, so don't step forward.
Go to the red carpet.
All right, what's that?
Go to the red carpet.
Oh, the red carpet, yeah, that's right. That's off the screen. So if you guys want to join me over here. All right, so any questions for our speakers? Maybe you can ask them questions about their development process. You can ask them more about their topic, whatever you would like. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I'll just holler, I'm loud. Dr. DeRuntz, is it?
Yes.
Thank you for your talk. I'm wondering what sorts of things is this program that you were talking about doing to address the issues that these sort of soft skills tend to be the kinds of skills that are representative of maleness and whiteness in workplaces? What is your program doing to address those issues so that individuals, women of color, non-white men are able to thrive in a business environment that tends to not typically be very welcoming to patterns of behavior in the workplace that don't fit maleness and whiteness?
I really wish my students were up here. They could answer that question. I think that what you would find is that we're a program where we don't really see gender. We respect it. We don't see it. They learn how to work together without any machismo, any maleness, any femaleness. We treat everyone equally. We learn that. And if it ever comes out where we sense that type of gender arrogance, it's addressed. And I think that they're much better at answering that question than I am because they live it and do it.
Maybe there's some students here, right? So they'd love to speak about it. Yeah. I don't know if you want to be put on the spot, but you can talk about it too.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so we have other questions. Yes.
I have a question for Katherine.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking the difference in the ability facility to have kids for African American women and white women, those are because of biology issues or they are more cultural issues that are related with how they are treated in the medical system?
I would say it's not as much about ability to have children. I think because of the systemic indifferences in American culture and society, white women are, just because of not, if this isn't right, but generally are a little bit better, are able to get a higher education and continue on to bachelor's and post-grad. Like me, I'm not going to have kids until I finish my PhD in like another 5 years. So I think that that is probably one of the main reasons that maybe the white population is a little lower than the non-white population in America. I think that would be, but I'm not, I do not know that statistic off the top of my head. This is me guessing.
Can't see all the hands. Yes.
I just wanted to add to that because I did my master's research on infant mortality and infant maternal mortality. It's not an issue of biology. The Institute of Medicine actually did a report on this. It's an issue of systemic treatment and racism within the structure of the healthcare system. So that's why you're going to see a higher percentage of maternal mortality with women of color than European countries.
Yeah, and I think that was slightly addressed, at least with the Serena Williams example. But and I think that's your point as well, that Serena Williams, someone that's super well known, has lots of money, has to fight for her health care as well. Right? Yes.
My question is for you, Emily. What's one of the most memorable Mac stories someone has told you?
Oh goodness, there's been a lot. I think one of the most memorable ones was more along the lines of sentimentality. There was one woman that was, when I told her I researched Mac, she was telling me her Mac story was that her grandmother used to make her family mac and cheese before Thanksgiving, but right after that Thanksgiving, her grandmother passed away. So that was something she always associated with her grandmother, and that's something that they actually continued on in their family traditions afterwards. And for me, that just kind of touched a special place because it just kind of makes an example of that emotional connection to the food, and they're still having it at their Thanksgivings because they think of their grandmother through that.
I thought we got a lot of boos and stuff, so I think we should do a poll here. So who is of the Kraft mac and cheese variety? Go ahead and raise your hand. Who's Velveeta, shells and cheese? Oh, it's like half and half, yeah. All right, I'd like to split the audience now into half. Who mixes them together?
What?
All right, I saw a hand up over here, yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, and then I'll come to you second.
This is a question for Shema. Well, given Americans' general lack of geographical knowledge, I think we're probably safe to say that, what kinds of responses do you get when people hear that you're a nonprofit for Bangladeshis? Do they respond in terms of, where is that? Do they talk about storms washing away islands at the Delta? Do they talk about Islam? What are the responses you get from the American side of things?
Good question. Most of the time people try to pretend like they totally know where it is and they know what Bangladesh is about. And a lot of times I say, it's a tiny country, it's smaller than the size of Illinois, it's next to India. So a lot of people don't know about it. I used to get the question of like, well, why should we care about Bangladesh? When we have kids here, and hopefully I address that a little bit in the talk. And sometimes I get, like, about the Muslim population, we have to explain that the country is Muslim, and it's not like we are proselytizing and missionaries. The country is predominantly a Muslim country. So those are some of the responses I get. Yeah. Not as weird as you would think, besides faking that they know it.
Yes, go ahead.
About what you learned from this process. There's a thing called the 2-minute, it might be a 3-minute dissertation presentation that, at least in my department, the Department of History, we've been experimenting with, is giving you a way to figure out how to talk about what really matters in a relatively short period of time. And that's an incredibly hard thing to do. And so I'd love to hear Nidhi or all of you talk about what the process was like of taking an idea and arriving at the product.
Anyone?
For me, it was a lot of looking at my thesis and saying, okay, these are the main points throughout, and I'm very lucky in that, obviously, I have organized my thesis, and I've organized it in a way to where I know, like, the main topics. So I kind of picked from each section. I tried to do the quickest, because there's a lot more to all the mac and cheese, surprisingly. I tried to put into the baseline things that people would want to know without having to go into super detail. So learning how to condense everything was the big thing, and identify what's most important and what people will care about the most, if that makes sense.
For me, this is
Okay.
for me, it was based on my thesis, and clearly there was a lot of information, and I actually didn't get to all of it. Because it's really hard, because I have, at least for me, a lot, this is the kind of demographic basis of my thesis, so just kind of isolating part of it, because I didn't end up talking about any of the media texts that I discussed, because I'm a film scholar. I just focused on that. And obviously media goes a little bit too much information, so learn from my mistakes.
Craig, I forget the phrase that you use where you choose a topic that you want to talk about, what you know best. And so the idea of what we're talking about, relatively simple, is what we live every day and we know very well. It's the process that was so difficult here. And it took a little bit of thinking, a lot of courage to challenge ourselves to be able to do this in the 5-minute time period, and then, of course, get up before you and deliver it. And so really it's about developing that courage and challenging yourself to get outside your comfort zone, to be a little bit braver today than you were yesterday.
I was lucky enough that Craig just told me what to do. He said, tell a few stories. So that wasn't my challenge. I think my challenge is I felt very comfortable talking in front of people and naturally speaking, but to memorize something was a whole different experience. So that was what was more challenging for me.
I just think there's tremendous pedagogical potential in this model, so I'm super excited to witness it. Thank you.
Well, great, yeah, thank you for that. And we actually do this in several of our courses. We teach a business and professional communication course where students actually do this, and we use a little bit of gamification. They sort of go through a bracket, and those that end up in the top 8 get to sort of go head-to-head in a live presentation that we record. And I've been doing this since 2013 in classes, and I think for the greatest pedagogical value, other than just building the confidence of public speaking, is that it does require people to put a lot of practice into it, which is a step they like to skip sometimes, throw it together at the last minute. So, all right, with that said, we are at the end of our 10-minute segment. Thank you all for being on the stage and answering questions. Thank you all for being such a great audience. I mean, I think that just the vibe in here is a very positive one, and the speakers are definitely able to feel that. I can feel it up here, and I can feel it backstage. So I'd like you to sort of get ready for the second half. The speakers that are speaking in this, you can go ahead and get in your frame of mind and queue up. I have a little bit of a video here that we'll play just to kind of make sure everybody gets back in time. So we all want you to make some noise right now, so go ahead and hit that. That's right. Maybe I asked for that a little too soon because I actually say, are you ready for the second act here? And then I say, make some noise. Clap. Yeah, that's right. Applause meter. Oh, you're doing it. That's right. Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do another prize at this time. There's a couple, so I'm going to do the 2 Primos pizzas again. So I have another 2 Primos pizzas, and then after a couple of next talks, I have a $25 Walmart gift card, and then a $50 gift card to Great Boars of Fire. So lots of great prizes coming up. For another 2 Primos pizzas, we have 19065. I don't know if they came together, maybe they were stuck together. I think the last one was 66. So. All right, awesome. Thank you. So you get some Primo's pizza. Woo! All right, so our next 4 speakers are Greg Wendt, Lacey Brown, DJ Jeffries, and Diogo Seixas. Yes! I know everybody's been pronouncing it wrong, and then you're going to go tell people just like, Bangladesh, you're going to say, I knew that it was Seixas the whole time. Even though even tonight, he's been so gracious. I think the whole time we've been together practicing, I've been calling him Seixas. So I'm sorry about that. All right, our next speaker is Greg Wendt. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that gets queued up here. Greg is brave enough to lead us off into the second act, but actually he needed that 10-minute break to be able to switch gears. As I mentioned, he's actually doing all of the video recording here tonight for us. One thing that's great about Ignite Talks is you can produce these videos and then share them on their channel across the globe. So he's been sort of making sure all the cameras are working, then got that 10 minutes to sort of get into his frame of mind. Personally, I would like to thank Greg for his support and encouragement. He is an instructional technologist, and he comes into our classrooms and does a lot of great things. And as soon as I mentioned I was going to do an Ignite Talk, he got right behind it. So I think he's a tremendous asset to SIU. Greg says his cameras are his sketchbooks, using them for art, entertainment, activism, and education, but he loves to get on stage to communicate important ideas and to make people laugh. Greg is passionate and compassionate. I think this comes through in his Ignite Talk. We are not created equal. Welcome to the stage, Greg Wendt.
All right, Mike, you can get my big old face off the screen. Get this thing rolling. Welcome back to Ignite SIU. Good to see everybody. This talk, the goal of this talk is to debunk the myth that we are all created equal. We live in a competitive society where money, weapons, and power, more so than equality, dictate life in our so-called democracy. U.S. Declaration of Independence states we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. But if we, and it colors our perceptions and forms the basis of our laws. But what is actually self-evident can be far different. I learned this when I thought I was equal to LeBron James, and then he posterized my ass. In that moment, I realized how unequal we really are. But the Constitution continues, the Declaration continues. They are endowed by their Creator with these unalienable rights for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Ironically, this was written by Thomas Jefferson, a man who held over 600 slaves throughout his lifetime. Now, is a slave equal to a free person? Does the slave have the same unalienable rights as a free person? I don't think so. He liked the black women. So, we move on. And what about women? Women were not treated equally. Women were not considered equal. Women were subservient to men. And today, they are still considered subservient in many cultures and even in some places around the United States. Today in the United States, women continue to make less money than men, and only recently is sexual assault being seriously taken as a crime worth punishing. And many men still get away with it. Now, let's look at natural ability. How many of us can play basketball as well as Michael Jordan, or play guitar like Carlos Santana? How many of us think, if I only practiced enough, I could be as good as one of those guys? How many of us can sing like Beyonce, or paint like Frida Kahlo? How many of us can reach the pinnacle of our profession and be considered the best? Few of us are born with such natural ability or access to opportunities. What about birthplace? We just heard about Bangladesh. But what if you happen to be born in one of the many war-torn places on Earth? Are you created equal? Will you have the same chance for happiness? We make such a stink about immigration, but we were just lucky as Americans to be born in the United States. It didn't take any skill or effort. But even here in the US of A, right here in Carbondale and throughout the United States, the gap between rich and poor makes us very unequal. And the race for profit is only making that more unequal. Now, is the black man pulled over by the police equal to the white man? Is he going to be treated equally? Is he going to drive away unharmed? Is the police officer who commits a crime ever equally treated by the legal system? Now, forget about social issues for the moment. What about nature? Nature produces inequality. Is a baby born with brain damage going to have the same chance at life, the same equality as a healthy baby? Will it have the same opportunities for happiness? I don't think so. Now, what about intelligence? Were you the smartest kid in your class? I wasn't, but somebody was, and everyone else was not. Now, no matter what your grandparents tell you, people are smarter than you, and some people are way smarter. Like Copernicus, 500 years ago, figured out that Earth is a giant spaceship flying around the sun. Can you imagine even beginning to figure that out? And he didn't even have a smartphone. Now, some people are really smart and really funny. In his hilarious stand-up Tambourine, Chris Rock tells us how schools are lying to our children. Lying, saying, you could be anything you want to be. Anything. He corrects that lie. He says, you can be anything you want to be, if you're good at it, and they're hiring, right? That's why we go to college, to find out what we like and what we're good at so we can get a job. Now, meanwhile, we live in a society that tells us to dream big, and we should. We should believe in ourselves. But you have to recognize also there are forces that want to enslave us, that want to keep us subservient. So, we've got to, not all of us can be rock stars, but none of us have to be slaves. No one deserves to be a slave. So yes, find your passion and get damn good at it. And then do something good for this world, because plenty of people are suffering while the rich get richer. So wake up, stay awake, be aware, be humble, be passionate, be compassionate, and give yourself a chance and others a chance to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. Thank you.
So I asked Greg what advice he would give for anybody doing an Ignite talk for the first time, and he said rehearse a lot, record yourself, play it back to improve your intonation. I think he did a lot of work, and I love that he took some risk with his voice and body. So anyway, congratulations for being done, Greg. I know it was tough to do. So one thing also about Ignites is it does bring together the community and a variety of people, and there is an event not next Saturday, but May 4th, I believe that is next Saturday actually, at 7 p.m. A London-based comedian, Sam Rhodes, will be here, and he's filming a full-length comedy special for the BBC in this very room. And I just learned about that because I'm emceeing tonight, so that's the cool thing about Ignite Talks. So I just want to throw that out there again next Saturday. What you can do is the lucky winner can go to Chango's, because I have a $15 gift card, and then go see that comedian. 19122. Yay! All right. Make sure you catch up with me after the show for a little Chango's and maybe go to that comedy show. All right, Greg's talk was based on the fact that we are not all created equal. Oftentimes it seems that some politicians or other power brokers don't want to recognize our inequalities. So how can we get them to pay attention? How about nominate a pig for president? Lacey Brown, a doctoral candidate in the Communication Studies Department, is studying how stigmatized organizations frame their external identity, and is going to show us that nominating a pig for president is a literal, not a figurative, suggestion. She hopes her talk, Pigasus for President, will inspire you to be rebellious in your everyday life. Welcome to the stage, Lacey Brown.
In 1968, there were three key presidential nominees fighting for the seat of U.S. president. Nixon, the Republican nominee, Humphreys, the Democratic nominee, and a candidate that you might not be familiar with, Pigasus, who was nominated by the Youth International Party, also known as the Yippies. The Yippies were co-founded by Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. They viewed their organization as a radicalization of hippies, so folks who were into psychedelics, but also social justice. The Yippies were a decentralized organization grounded in anarchist principles. Abbie Hoffman argued that a democracy should be measured by the freedom we give those who dissent, not simply the freedom we give those who conform. The Yippies dissented in 1968 by nominating a pig for president. Jerry Rubin officially announced Pigasus's nomination during the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Rubin argued that the pig needed Secret Service protection and should be privy to foreign policy briefings at the White House. Eventually, the police showed up, and unfortunately, they arrested everybody. Pigasus's nomination was not taken seriously by the US government. However, Hoffman argues that a revolution isn't fixed in an ideology or fashioned to a particular decade. It's embedded in our human spirit. I'm hoping that Pigasus's story will remind you of your rebellious spirit as we enter the 2020 election. Nominating a pig for president was a small slice of humor during the very violent political climate of the late 1960s. We were in the midst of the Vietnam War. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy had just been assassinated, and many young Americans were feeling powerless against the machine of the US government. However, the Yippies were political pranksters, so they viewed being arrested for disorderly conduct and disturbing the peace and bringing a pig to the city of Chicago as their way of laughing at the machine. 8 people were actually arrested for Pigasus's nomination, including Rubin and Abbie Hoffman, and their trial was just as absurd as the pig himself. Their lawyer asked a fellow Yippie to describe Pigasus's nomination and arrest. The lawyer asked, "Were you aware that an officer had squealed on you?" To make matters even more hysterical, Judge Julius Hoffman oversaw the trial and had to make a statement to the court that he was in fact not related to Abbie Hoffman, To which Abby responded, "Dad, Dad, why have you forsaken me?" Abby Hoffman and Reuben attended court wearing judicial robes. When asked to remove them, they were wearing Chicago police uniforms underneath. So they were charged with numerous counts of contempt, which ranged from 2.5 years to 5 years in prison. 5 of the defendants were charged with starting a riot in Chicago, which was a 5-year sentence and a $5,000 fine. However, all of these charges were overturned, and no one actually served time. I don't necessarily view this as a political win. It was just simply a small distraction within the larger political system. However, we can learn something from these small acts of rebellion. Jonah Raskin, who writes about the adventures of Abby Hoffman and was a Yippie himself, explains that they rebelled in their lifestyle. It was their hair, what they ate, drank, the language they used. He argued that the revolution was supposed to be fun. It wasn't supposed to be grit your teeth and suffer through it. Abby Hoffman rebelled by having fun. He got into trouble by disrupting socially acceptable norms, and he made a fool of himself. But he also became a political icon. So Abby Hoffman's lawyer actually later said that he was able to create a political protest simply by creating laughter. As we enter the very serious, high-stakes 2020 election, I want to remind you of the Yippie Manifesto. Come, all you rebel rousers, barricade jumpers, peacock freaks, truth seekers, artists, poets, dancers, and lovers. Make a revolution by bucking the system.
Good job, Lacey. So what might the advice be that you would give to someone that's just starting out on an Ignite Talk journey?
Start with something that you love. I've loved Abby Hoffman since high school. I think that was my first introduction to being politically radicalized. So I would start with, what are you passionate about? And then from there, it's just really easy to write it.
Awesome. So at this time, I want to say that Lacey is actually going to be leaving SIU to take a faculty job at the University of Tampa starting in the fall. So congratulations, Lacey. Maybe you will be lucky in drawing the winner of a Walmart $25 gift card.
I feel like that Walmart gift card doesn't go well after Abby Hoffman.
That's why I selected it, actually.
If you want to be a real protester, you should light the gift card on fire. Okay, so number 19014.
All right, awesome. See me after the show. Our next speaker is DJ Jeffries. He's a graduate of Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. During his career, he has been awarded the Bill and Melinda Gates Millennium Fellowship, the University Innovations Fellowship through the University of Stanford, and the Richard B. Fisher Fellowship from Morgan Stanley. He's the founder and editor of leadtowin.com, an online motivation publication, and is currently an HR innovation analyst at Morgan Stanley. Tonight, he shares insights that remind us that work does not have to suck. Welcome to the stage, DJ Jeffries.
Okay. Did you know over the course of your lifetime, you will spend on average 13 years and 2 months at work? That's more time than socializing, 1 year, more time than eating, 4.5 years, and more time than Netflix, which is about 8 years. For all this time people spend at work, you would assume that they love the work they're doing, but that's just not the case. In fact, in 2017, a study across 19 industries found that 71% of employees are unhappy at work and looking to change jobs. In the same year, a Gallup poll found that 85% of employees are not engaged at work, and 71% of millennials, who will make up the majority of the workforce by 2030, are not engaged at work. For my part, I found myself 2 years after graduating among these unhappy millennials. And it wasn't that the work itself sucked, it's just that there was a lot of things going on in my life at one time. Firstly, I had experienced 2 family deaths in rapid succession, and secondly, I was struggling to transition from college, where Red Bulls and all-nighters are the standard, and you just keep working until the work gets done. At work, the work is never done, and that is why they keep paying you. So here I was 6 months in, a highly engaged employee, and I was completely burned out. Now, this isn't unheard of. The Harvard Business Review found that 1 in 5 highly engaged employees are at risk of experiencing burnout. So, so I think after this, thinking about work and how fragile life is, I did what any rational person would do. I packed up my things, hopped on a plane, and I fled the country. And over the next 6 months, I traveled to 15 different countries, meeting people from all over the world. And in each and every country I went to, I met someone who also had similar feelings about work and decided that they would leave their countries to try to get more meaning in life. So this commonality amongst us got me thinking about what is it that makes work suck so much? After all, we're told that if you have a good job, that'll lead to a good life. So why are so many people unhappy at work? And to help me find the answer, I started looking at American history. And what I found is that for most of our history, profits, money, and the work came before the actual people who were doing this work. And some of this began to change in the 19th century after a series of events, including workers beginning to band together and the rise of unions led to the 40-hour work week. This was something implemented by Henry Ford, who thought that too much work and not enough balance limited production. If you think about it, work conditions back then were awful. There were no bathroom breaks, no sick time, no safety practices. And because many people weren't as educated as they are now, there were limited work options for the employees themselves. A lot has changed since then, and now companies are working harder and harder to try to maintain a limited pool of talent. And since then, one of the biggest trends that's happened is the idea of sabbatical, where employees can take months or even years off of work to focus on personal development. For me, my own journey turned out to be a sabbatical of sorts, where I actually learned a lot about the nature of work. And one of the main things I found that no matter what Rihanna says, work is no way to live a life. And no matter how ambitious you are, if you spend too much time working and don't find balance, it can be detrimental to your career. So what I realized is that work, it is important, but it's not all that it is. And what you do doesn't start and end what you do on your day job. It's important that you keep up your outside relationships and you bring your whole self to work. So for my part, after my sabbatical, I returned to work with a new job, a better job, where we focus a lot about the employee experience and how we can make work better for all of our employees. In a sense, it was a complete circle. Here's what I learned on my journey. Work to live, don't live to work. As I said, what you do at work matters, but what you do doesn't start and end with work. You'll spend more time working than just about anything else in your life, so you have to make it worth it. A trip around the world is a bit radical for most people, but everyone can start by maintaining some sense of balance, because your time is limited, so you need to make sure that you use it effectively. When I was on my journey, someone told me, you can always make more time, you can always make more money, but you can never make more time. So I implore you to use your time wisely, both inside and outside of work. It won't change your job, but it might just change the impact it has on your life. Thank you.
Thank you, DJ. If you're inspired by DJ's talk, I want to invite you to tomorrow's event at 4 p.m. in the Kleinau Theater on SIU in the Department of Communication Studies, where DJ is going to talk about the value of the liberal arts education and the future of work that's being reshaped by artificial intelligence. So that'll be at 4 p.m. tomorrow in the Kleinau Theater in the Communication Studies Department. Our last speaker for the evening is Diogo Seixas. Diogo is working toward his MBA at SIU. He is the coordinator of the Leadership Development Program and co-founder of the Journey Movement in Brazil. I placed Diogo last in the lineup because he, in his own words, he wants to inspire the audience. And well, I want to leave the audience inspired. After his talk, we will have 5 minutes of questions for these speakers, and that'll take us right to the time for exit. So at this time, I'd like to welcome to the stage Diogo Seixas.
Thank you. I like that Craig put the expectations up there, right? Now I need to work on it. Let's go. I'm ready. So for the past 4 years, I've been working with college students from all ages. And the question that I hear the most is this: what should I do with my life? First time I heard that question was from my friend Kyle that was traveling all over Brazil looking for good educational practices. He told me that he once went to a school and asked the little kids there, who here wants to be an artist? And then all of them raised their hands, super excited about it. And then he went to 5th grade, asked the same question, 30% raised their hands. And then he went to senior year of high school, same question, and only one person raised his hand. It was probably the weirdo at the back of the room. So why did that happen? Why, when we were kids, we want to be artists, we want to be superheroes, and then we grow up and we forget about those things? So I went to see by myself if that was true. And I started asking around in my speeches and trainings, what is your dream? What do you want to do for life? And I heard so many cool things, like I want to be a professor to change the educational system, or I want to be a doctor to cure cancer, or I want to be a politician to change how things are made today. But most part of the time, I heard things like, I don't have a dream, or sometimes I want to be rich, which it's fine, but it cannot be the final goal, right? How are people, especially students, spending their whole lives only trying to get rich? Well, I have my own theories about why that happens, and everything starts with this guy, Ford. So he was part of that mass production thing, right? Where we're producing cars in line. So you put the door here, you put the engine here, and so on. Everything had to happen fast, without waste. And then school had to adapt to the same system, creating students for that. So we stopped imagining about things. We stopped thinking about things, questioning about things. Then our parents had to adapt to the same system too, because their parents worked super hard to give them a good life, but that wasn't enough. So they worked even harder to give us a good life, and they did it. But today, we are the generation who has more time, more freedom, but we have no idea about what to do with that time and freedom. Ford used to say, you can choose whatever car you want as long as it's black. Today, students can choose whatever major they want as long as it makes them rich. Crazy, right? So, as a good educator, always trying to save the world, I came up with a few things that we can do to kind of like solve that problem. And the first thing we need to do is to get rid of that adulting thing. We need to go back to that child mentality and start thinking more about things, thinking more possibilities. No walls, no barriers, everything's possible somehow. Maybe we should start something called the childing process, where we start dreaming more about things. Because for things to happen in the real world, first, they need to happen over here in your head. And for me, that process was always like easy. I was always a dreamer. And I remember a little bit before coming back to Carbondale in 2017, I was in a very good place in my life. My company was doing great in Brazil. I was doing a lot of speeches, getting to know a lot of people. I got a proposal to come back to Carbondale, get my MBA, work for the LDP. And I remember I was walking in a street, and this postal card salesman stopped me, and he gave me this card. He was saying, "You are special, I believe you." I decided to buy the card and to give it to the most special person I would meet in the next 2 months. Well, 2 days later, I was giving a speech to almost 200 people. And I had this inside that it would be impossible to give that one card to only one person, because everyone is special in different ways. So I told them what was happening in my life, and I decided to split the card in 200 pieces. And we did. I told them that if someday they stop believing in themselves, they should look at the piece of paper, the piece of card, and remember that someone, somewhere, someone believes them. Well, a month later, I met this girl that still had her piece of card. She told me how important that event was for her and how important those words were for her. Then another month later, I met other 3 guys that were still holding to the same piece of card. That piece of card represents hope. It's so hard to find people to believe in the crazy things we do, that when we find that hope, we don't want to let it go. So I believe that if we start dreaming more about things, and if we start believing more in one another, we can create this culture of positive change that can make us more happy, because that should be the final goal. So dream on, people. Thank you.
All right, so at this time, I'd like to invite the last four speakers back up to the stage to engage in 5 minutes of Q&A, which will take us right to the 8:30 mark. At that time, I will give one last door prize, which is a $50 value to the Blue Boar. So, any questions from the audience of Diogo? And then, as others come up, you can ask. I can't see anything. Got to come really far forward. Any questions? Yes.
What is your dream? Ooh, that's a good one. My company today has the vision, and it was like, my dream became a vision in a company, that we want to create more leaders who transform dreams in reality. So that's what I think I do today. Back in Brazil, here with you guys, helping people to achieve their dreams, and then we can create a better world through all that. Woo! What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. That's it.
I thought there were people projecting. Everybody didn't want the mic last time. Sorry. Is there any questions for the speakers? Yes, please.
This one's for DJ. How do you go about starting a sabbatical like that? Like, it seems so often that right when we leave, we have all this debt, and we have to start paying it back right away. So, you know, you were able to take this sabbatical and, you know, really find a self-fulfillment. How would you even start doing that?
Yeah, I think my part is a little interesting because, so I didn't ask for permission, I kind of asked for forgiveness, which I wouldn't recommend, and partially because I had a lot of things going on in my life. But when I was considering leaving, everyone that I knew kept saying, like, oh, you shouldn't give up this great job, like this gap in your resume, it's gonna be so much. And for me, all of that was just background noise because I needed to get the space to do it. I think just naturally, the way the market is moving, a lot of companies are considering sabbatical policies. And off the record, a lot of financial firms in particular, I work at a financial firm, they're considering sabbaticals because employees need that time and that space. And like we expected over time that the work model would change, and it just hasn't changed so much to keep up with expectations. But now with a limited workforce, they need to do something to be competitive. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yes.
The question is also for DJ. Where did you go?
Okay, so I went to Colombia first. I spent about 2 months in Colombia, and then I went to Europe. So I went to London, I went to Paris, I went to Amsterdam, I went to Brussels, I went to Scotland, I went to Athens, I went to Budapest, Berlin, Prague, and maybe 3 more. I didn't go to Brazil, no, but maybe my next sabbatical. But yeah, so those were a lot of them. Some other, I went to Spain, so, and Italy, so that's probably it, I guess.
I have a quick story about this, actually. I think it ended up being a little more expensive than you thought, because I remember getting an email from you saying, hey, does anybody need any work that I could do?
I did a lot of freelance.
Yeah. Yes.
My question is for Lacey. Can you identify a group, a contemporary group that you feel like has a similar impact or is about to that the Yippies did? Or follow-up, if you can think of one, what animal should run for president?
Well, one organization that I'm a big fan of right now is Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. And they focus on solidarity, not charity, when a community is affected by a natural disaster. And so I think their approach to rebuilding a community is more sustainable than maybe FEMA or the Red Cross. And they do so by sometimes they'll access food pantries by making fake FEMA passes to then get resources to then actually give it to people who need it without having all the red tape and bureaucracy that FEMA requires. So I love Mutual Aid Disaster Relief is an amazing organization.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question maybe for all of you and Craig too. The process. So about 2 months ago you started this. Well, I know you started a long time ago, Craig, but 2 months you started. So what did you show up to selection or to select from to begin this process of making these speeches? Did you start with the images? Did you start with the topic? Did you have an essay? How did you begin? And I'm interested in how you started so I can get a sense of how you got to where you finished.
Since I'm a photographer and video maker, I was going to do something on photography, I was going to do something on travel, and didn't feel juicy enough, but I was going through a bunch of images, and I was kind of overwhelmed because I have a lot of images. And then, you know, I'm reading the paper every day. There's a crisis every single day with the power that be right now. So I figured, okay, let me do something. I've been griping about inequality. There's so many things we can complain about, and so let me just look at that. So then Craig actually said, you should write this before you even look at any images. Write it out, have your 5 minutes, and go from there. But I had to go back and forth, as he said earlier. Like, I probably spent 30 or more hours. I mean, he talked to me about this when last year, right? And I'm like, I'm going to do that, right? Like, I'll have 10 talks ready by then. That's like, you know. And anyway, it's just a lot of. This is how it works for me with any kind of project. I go through all kinds of gyrations. Maybe other people are more organized.
Well, actually, at this time, we're watching the timer here, so it is out of time for us. And I will say one thing is every person is different. And if you're going to put on an event like this, you have to coach the speakers. And the coaching involves a variety of things. So some speakers might just need to sit down and, like, for example, with Dr. DeRuntz, I said, why don't you just start telling me some stories? And I started typing some stuff out for him. I know with you, I was like, don't look at images because you were all over the place. With Lacey, she's been doing it in classes. I was like, choose a topic, I'll see you later. DJ's done a lot of these, same thing. I knew that he would just kind of do it. I don't know, what was your process?
I think mine, I got like a main goal, and then I thought about a few stories that I wanted to tell, and then I had like to make those stories short to fill in the whole presentation, and then slides, and finally, yeah, images. That's it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different processes to it, so whatever works for you, you should go ahead and do. And I want to say that Ignites are held all over the world in large theaters, small pubs in the UK, and at a variety of tech and geek conferences like South by Southwest and Velocity. Tonight's event was made possible by the support of the College of Liberal Arts, Department of Communication Studies, Communication at Work LLC, Gregory Wendt, thank you very much for doing all of the tech. So do you think you can perform better? Do you agree or disagree with the topic and want to add your voice to the conversation? If you answered yes to either of those questions, I look forward to seeing you up here on stage at Ignite SIUC 2020. Thank you for giving us your time this evening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Have a great night.